eyes watering, and it was honestly like entering a war zone. There were people screaming, people hollering, there were cops everywhere, firefighters, still cars on fire, people yelling. It's just been extremely unnerving and upsetting, and people wanting to grieve during this, and we understand that, but city leaders saying, go home, let's talk about this tomorrow. So the curfew is in effect at 8 o'clock across the entire city now. We got the alert on our phone, and it does go into effect until 5:30 tomorrow morning. And, you know, we're seeing looting, we're seeing people hanging from the light poles earlier, cop cars on fire, people on the top of the metro buses. I mean, this is just getting way out of hand, and the sheriff pleading that violence is not the answer to this. Alex?
Yeah, Haley, it's Christine here. So in less than an hour, people are supposed to be off the streets of L.A., 8 p.m. The mayor saying that anyone caught outdoors after 8 p.m. will be arrested. We all got this cell phone alert saying that the curfew would be enforced. So, Haley, my question for you is, are you hearing anybody say that, okay, I'm going to go home now? Are you seeing people retreat, people leave, people head to their cars?
It's a completely different scene than it was earlier today, Christine. It started out, as you guys know, with about 25,000 protesters. It's now gotten down to less than 5,000 protesters. Yes, we are seeing a lot of people leaving, but we're also seeing people go in. And what's scary that we've heard today is that you don't normally see cop cars on fire in the middle of the day. And so the scary part is what is going to happen when night falls, and hopefully that curfew will deter people. But I am seeing businesses around here shutting down early, and it's very sad to see because they're finally being able to open their doors. I mean, the city and our entire country has been going through so much with this pandemic, and now this on top of everything else, and rightfully so that they are exercising their First Amendment rights, but violence is not the way to do it.
You know, just the other night we had a reporter out on Melrose, out by the Grove, talking about the shops reopening, the excitement for those retailers, not only reopening, but allowing people to come inside to shop. Certainly what a difference a day makes when it comes to the developments of this week with the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis and reaction across the country and here in Los Angeles as well. So we are watching, Haley, one scene right now where we have the fire department on scene putting out a fire at one business. Haley, you're at one location. We're going to bring in right now Rick Dickert, who has perspective on what we're seeing. Rick?
And that is Melrose. That is Adidas. That is the Adidas store and Melrose Avenue right there just to the west of Fairfax Avenue, that trendy area of Melrose there, and adjacent to Adidas is Pericolati that is burning right now. And fortunately, unlike last night when we saw that one Los Angeles Fire Department crew essentially being assaulted, pulling their hose lines away, they're able to fight this fire. If I was up in Skyfox right now, we'd be covering a building fire and looking at a situation, what caused that fire. This was an intentional fire set, and Melrose Avenue was shut down. LAFD on the scene there, and you could see there's going to be tremendous destruction here with these businesses. And you think about that, and we've mentioned this, all of us have, over the last couple of days, the economic toll that the pandemic has taken on us. And now, what this is going to do to our city, every patrol car that you've seen burned, every SUV, every building that you've seen burned, every business, that is going to pose an economic toll as well. This is something our city has never seen, and I saw it evolving last night with you, Alex and Christine. And please stay at home for your safety, even though you may want to go out and voice your opinion in a really good, positive way. It's not safe tonight. Last night, and you mentioned, as I toss it back to you, Christine and Alex, Minneapolis was under that curfew at 8 o'clock. And what did you see? You saw thousands of people out on the streets. And as we approach that 8 o'clock hour, in about 40 minutes or so, we're still seeing a lot of people out on the streets as well, protesting. They are not going to abide by that, likely, many of them, as we see somebody spray some likely obscenities on the streets there of our city. Please stay home and stay safe. And if you do go out, you're going to endanger yourself as well. And we will continue to cover this the best we can from the air and on the ground. As our LAFD, our first responders who've had to deal with the COVID-19 COVID-19 crisis, and now this. Our buildings, our residential structures burning right now, and coming off of such an awful time.
All right, Rick Dickert, we will check in with you again shortly, but now we want to bring in Rick Lozano, who joins us from downtown LA.
All right, Alex, good evening, everyone. We are on the west side of the 110 freeway on Beaudry Avenue. And from our perspective here, we can't really see the inner workings of the downtown area. However, we can tell you that just within the last half hour or so, there's been a real spike in activity through downtown Los Angeles. North and south on the 110 freeway, we've heard dozens and dozens of police cars going in either direction, and east to west on a number of the streets that run through downtown as well. Over on the northeast side of downtown, for now you can't really see the smoke that was billowing up there a little bit earlier, but there was a fire in that area of the downtown area, and in fact fairly close, it looks like, to the Los Angeles Police Department headquarters, but that has been extinguished, it looks like, for the most part, and not known whether it's related to any protests that might be going on in that area. Back over to the more to the center of downtown, along the area of the financial district, we've heard some loud bangs coming from there, perhaps police flashbangs that have been detonated to perhaps disperse any crowds that may be gathering there. Also in the air, LAPD helicopters have been hovering overhead as, again, the activity in downtown Los Angeles seems to be picking up ever so slightly. And again, that curfew beginning at 8 p.m. tonight, and we've been told by the mayor that the city is not going to put up with any more of the type of behavior that existed in the downtown area last night. In fact, workers were out in force, and in fact some still are in the downtown area cleaning up after the disturbance of yesterday, boarding up businesses and making sure other businesses are protected. We have a lot of officers in the downtown area ready for whatever might occur, and we're going to be here throughout the course of the evening to keep you posted on any happenings that may occur. For now, we're live in downtown Los Angeles. I'm Rick Lozano, and we'll send it back to you in the studio.
Well, Rick, thank you very much. It seems the focus now of the protesters has not been downtown Los Angeles today. It has been the Fairfax district, where there was a gathering at the park there, and then protesters moved to different parts of the area in that region.
Yeah, although we should point out that last night, that sort of the worst troublemakers showed up after dark in downtown Los Angeles. The unfortunate thing is we've seen all this damage, and it's still not even dark yet.
Yeah. Well, you do have that curfew now at 8 p.m. where everybody has been warned that the mayor has said you will be arrested if caught out after 8 p.m. So as that word has spread by cell phone, and pretty much everybody in this day and age has a cell phone, so the excuse that you don't know about it is going to be hard for some to explain if this did indeed get to everybody's cell phone.
Yeah, although how do you enforce that? You know, I mean, they're so taxed with everything that they're doing. That's a real challenge.
Well, here's my question.
Police.
How many will abide by that, so that those that are out on the streets might be those that are up to perhaps no good or having to go somewhere?
And as we saw during shelter in place, which technically is still in place in Los Angeles, the overwhelming majority of people followed the rules, did the responsible thing, and were good citizens in the process.
Well, not only that, we now know how to go home and stay home, you know, quite easily. You did it for the past couple months, right? So the excuse that you might need to be out on the streets, I mean, you might have to explain that.
Bob DeCastro has been on the move with protesters throughout the day today. Bob, what's it looking like now?
All right, so that curfew, as you said, starts at 8 o'clock right now, so just over a half hour away from that curfew, and I can tell you it does not look like these crowds are going away. If anything, it looks like these crowds, at least here in this area, in the Fairfax district, just across from the Grove, on the other side, at Gardner and 3rd, it looks like the crowd is just growing. Just a few moments ago, I saw a number of officers that were also brought into this area, so they're supplementing the officers here at this this location at 3rd and Gardner. So more officers being brought here, and as you see, they're all lining up. They're just ready should anything happen here. I could tell you just about 15 minutes ago, there was someone that was on the other side of the fence over here who took a bottle, a very large bottle. There was something inside, threw it over the fence and into the crowd of officers there. It smashed down onto the ground, and then the officers came out, and I said before that the officers were taking their guns with rubber bullets, and they were shooting them to the ground and ricocheting them, but that wasn't the case here. They fired a number of rubber bullets into the protesters there as well. And so this is actually now another shot of something else that they were shooting, and this is, I will say, a lot harder than that other projectile that I showed you before. So it's really hard. Plastic on this side, if you're hit with one of these, I'm sure it could really inflict some damage or be extremely hurtful and damaging. So it does look like the crowds here are, if anything, growing. Just on the other side, by the way, over here, this is Park La Brea, the big apartment complex here. So on the other side of the fence over there, you're going to see a number of people, probably residents who live in the Park La Brea, who are now watching this standoff, if you will, between officers and a group of protesters at 3rd and Gardner. And again, more officers now being brought into this area. There hasn't been anything that has been, there have been no commands that have been given by the officers at this point. They've been very quiet. We haven't heard anything from the microphone in terms of dispersing or an order to disperse. Even though we're about a half hour away from any kind of a curfew, it just looks like they're just standing. There just looks like they're standing the line here, and the protesters are screaming at them. It's really hard, I will have to say, at this point, as we do this live TV, and there's so many expletives that are being screamed at. There are a lot of signs here that have expletives, so it's really hard to sanitize that. We're doing the best we can, but this is a live TV and a sort of what could be a volatile situation here up to now. Okay, so
sometimes you can't sanitize the news. So now we are seeing live Bob's picture as we see some of those police officers move in, potentially to start moving this crowd. It'll be really interesting, Christine, to think what they do after 8 o'clock, which is about a half hour away from now. So you see these officers moving in. Usually they will form a line. It is, and let's see if they're going to fire on these people here. We got the gun is aimed for non-lethal weapon. There's another one.
And as we've seen, they had been shooting largely at the ground on many occasions. Perhaps they're sending a message. We'll see what happens here. Remember that curfew takes place in about 30 minutes. Perhaps they're trying to send a strong message as we get close to 8 p.m. for those people to go home.
Often the police tactic will be to form a line and to try to move people back. And part of moving them back can be firing non-lethal weapons like rubber bullets or firing tear gas or other things, using batons, which happened earlier today in the Fairfax district, to try to keep those protesters on the move. But now you see even more officers showing up to this particular intersection. Haley Winslow is not far from there. Haley, what's the situation there?
It's getting it's getting a bit heated right now.
The cops started it.
Okay, no.
The cops started.
Okay. Speak your mind, don't curse.
Okay.
You're on live TV
All
right now. Tell us how you feel.
So we started protesting for 2 hours. We were peaceful. We negotiated.
All right, I think we may be having some problems with Haley's signal there. We'll try to get back with her it's important to hear from some of the protesters as well throughout this night to understand their message, especially the peaceful protesters who have an important message to share. The unfortunate reality is some of that message is being lost as we see vandalism, looting, fires being set throughout Southern California. This is back to Bob's position. Bob is hoping not to get hit or end up in the middle of all of this as we watch his position. I think we're watching this in real time, maybe from two different perspectives now, as police try to move back some of these protesters This is near the Grove in the Fairfax district.
And that is one of the challenges, having been there on the streets in a scene just like this, is to try to cover the story, to get close to the scene, but also to get out of the way when police are doing their job there, as well as to talk to the protesters there. You can see that line has moved up closer to the crowd. But again, Alex, you do bring a very big question here, is how do you get people to go home? You can impose the curfew, but that line of police there, how can they make them walk away, get in their cars, go in their homes?
And even if you arrest them, hundreds of the protesters last night were arrested and then released. So
let's go to Bob.
And some of them are out now protesting again. Bob.
Hi, yeah. So what had happened there is a number of those protesters, they were trying to get into the park, some of them trying to climb the fence. There were some other projectiles or things that were thrown at officers, and then the decision was made, it appears, to push them a little further away from the park because there are a number of people trying to climb the fence and things like that. And so this whole line pushed, I would say somewhat forcefully forward, pushed the line of people forward, and yeah, a little dicey there for us because Tony doesn't really see our photographer Tony Butita here doesn't see the line of officers pushing through, and they will just barrel right through. So we were just pushed back a little bit over here, but now just another standoff, if you will, between protesters and police at 3rd and Gardner here. And again, I don't think if there are things that are thrown at these officers, the officers would not hesitate or to fire their rubber bullets or their foam bullets at whoever is throwing anything at them.
And you know, I also want to point out. Go ahead, Bob.
We're just watching them push forward even further. They're watching them push forward even further, and you see what the protesters are doing. They hands up. Hands up. They say sometimes silence is their power, and over there. There's a little pushing and shoving. There's a little pushing and shoving, and this is where it gets into a real dangerous situation, especially when you have a large group of people, and what could be mentality of a larger group of people. When you have officers pushing them back, and there's resistance here as well. Emotions get really high, and you can hear the orders from the officers. They are heavily trained in all of this. They say move forward and hold, move forward and hold, and they move forward and hold. So as they move, if they're not moving, they're just pushing them forward. And some of the protesters here then just standing their ground with their hands up. But as I said, you could see how this could become a real tenuous situation if we just saw a few moments ago some projectiles bottles that were thrown at officers, and as soon as that happens, the guns come up, and then it becomes a potentially violent situation.
And we should note that usually with that rubber bullet gun, they shoot it to the ground and it bounces up, so it's not a direct hit with that rubber bullet. It is meant to perhaps send attention to somebody to comply. You can see that they have those. They've had them throughout the day, earlier when the crowd was much larger after the big protest this afternoon around noon in that area. So, Bob, can you tell where they are trying to push them to, encourage the crowd to go to where?
You know, that's really hard to say. That's really hard to say because in this short time they've really only gone a very short distance. Perhaps it's just further away from the park because people were trying to climb the park and get into Pan Pacific Park, which gives you easy access into the Grove, into that area. You were talking about them. What I had witnessed throughout the morning was that they were firing those rubber bullets on the ground to try to sort of just make some noise and try to push them back. But I've also seen them now draw the weapons when they see an instigator or someone who is throwing something at them or someone who is throwing a bottle. They go right after that person, and they're not pointing those rubber bullets at the ground. They're pointing the rubber bullets right at that protester.
You're saying that you've seen them fire at a protester or hold the weapon?
Yes. Yes, I've seen them. I've seen them fire the rubber bullets at someone who they believe had thrown a bottle at the crowd of officers, and one of the officers pointed and identified them, and they all ran after that person and were firing rubber bullets at that protester.
All right, Bob.
So they will do it. So they will do it.
Yeah, they do not like when police do not like to be attacked, and that's a lesson for any of you out there. That is one way to get attacked yourself. As we're looking now at the picture on your screen, this is at Fairfax and Rosewood. There is a fire in the middle of the street. We just saw one of those rioters that was throwing some accelerant on that fire to hopefully make it bigger. That person was trying to do that, and it looks like they have done that. Kevin Takumi, are you in Skyfox overhead this? Okay, so Kevin is not. We actually have two different choppers that are flying tonight, so we will get back to Kevin in a little bit. This is our other chopper. Rick Dickert, though, let's bring you into the conversation because, of course, you've been in Skyfox so many times over the years, and we see these now fires in the streets.
And it's what we saw last night, but to a much bigger degree. And you could see the LAPD. We're seeing more of a presence from the Los Angeles Police Department now. You could see that every single officer, as you, Alex and Christine, have mentioned, that all hands on deck. This is a tactical alert. This is an emergency that our city has not seen since 1992. I think that this actually surpasses any of the other issues that we've seen between 1992 and now with the Rodney King riots. And, you know, Rodney King came on after a couple of days and said, can't we all just get along? And I'm hopeful that we can reach that point and come to peace. But our city is literally on fire at this point. And the Los Angeles Fire Department is deployed, but those fire department members, those brave first responders that we were saluting during the COVID-19 crisis, are now having to deal with this. And as I mentioned earlier, that one of their crews was taken over, essentially. Their hose lines were pulled from them and thrown into the fire. Mm-hmm. So there's anxiety there. But I will tell you this, that we are watching this from above and on the ground in a mutual aid situation. The Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department is involved. As I said, every single LAPD officer that is available is coming to the scene to bring this to a peaceful end. As our city officials have said, they understand. We've watched it all. It was horrible images that we saw. And we just want to make sure that we don't cause more destruction to our city. So much economic chaos with COVID-19, and now this on top of it. So please, if you're watching these images from home, first and foremost, if you are angry and you do want to voice your opinion, please just tonight stay at home. Abide by that curfew that is coming up in a mere 20 minutes or so. And let's try to bring this back together. And the Los Angeles Police Department, as Leo Terrell, and I mentioned this last night as I tossed back to you, Alex and Christine, as he said when this was all evolving, that 98+% of our officers are good, amazing, caring officers that love to police, that they have a passion to protect and to serve their city. And we know that there have been some bad officers out there, but please just try to quell this and bring this to a peaceful end here, because this is out of control. And there are agencies from all over Southern California now, just like a wildfire, convening on Los Angeles right now. The Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, the Los Angeles County Fire Department, in the city, in the jurisdiction of the LAFD, coming to help out, to protect and to serve in a very volatile situation. And I know that there's crews even from my hometown of the beach cities rising up and coming to that location as well, just like they would if a fire was burning in the hills miles away.
And Rick and Christine, you know, we've talked so much about 1992 in the last few days. What's so striking to me is 1992 was primarily a Los Angeles issue. Mm-hmm. This is happening in almost every major city in the country right now. I mean, we are seeing similar images to this all over the place, where the entire country is dealing with this at the same time, including Minneapolis. Los Angeles, not even the center of this story.
Let me just give some context, because Alex, back in 1992, that was the first video we had seen from a civilian, somebody, just a person, taking video of police making that violent arrest. So because...
And it wasn't a phone, Christine.
Right, a camera.
It was a camera just by chance.
Yeah, so that the scenario has changed so much over the years in that there have been these issues of police concerns and police brutality, allegations of brutality, some seen on cell phone, some not. But there's been a lot more discussion, concern, and protest since that Rodney King issue with stuff being caught on video. But Rick, you actually painted a very strong visual for me, and that was of Rodney King, who did come out a few days after what happened there, with his voice shaking, saying, can we all get along?
He was.
Now, I interviewed Rodney King with some exclusive interviews several times, and a couple years after, he was actually putting out an offer to meet with the officers involved in his beating, and they declined that through their attorneys. But Rodney King was trying to put out a message in 1992.
He was.
As the city was under attack like this, too, with so many people so angry and hurting.
And it was, Christine,
and it was interesting.
A good point. And to see this and to watch this scene, this is reminiscent of those times. And we were both young and new to the business, Christine, and now we're seeing this replay.
And we spoke,
I know
Rick.
Our mayor mentioned that.
Yeah, we spoke last night, Rick, too.
Today, and this is embracing city, parts of our city from downtown LA, which the initial curfew was set. Downtown LA, bordered by the freeways of the 110, the 10, the 5, through Boyle Heights and the 101, that circular area. And then these scenes started to evolve, and now our entire city technically is under a lockdown. That there's a curfew. Please stay home. We're 15, 17 minutes away from that point. Please abide by that. Even if you're angry, as we all are watching that video, it's important that we try to come together right now as Rodney King, as you just said.
Right.
Let's get along. Let's try to bring this together. The majority of the officers that you see out there, the vast majority, are just trying to bring this to a peaceful.
Thank you, Rick. And we had Rodney King's daughter on our 7 o'clock news last night, who was in tears, the fact that this is happening again. We want to bring in Bill Maloogian to our coverage. Bill, we heard earlier from the mayor of Los Angeles, who said he did not want to bring in the National Guard, sort of dismissed that as a notion just a few hours ago, and now there's been a change.
There certainly has been. In the last 3 hours will reflect that change based off what we've seen. I just got off the phone with the LA County Sheriff's Department, and they confirmed to me an official request has been put in for the National Guard to respond here to LA County. That request is uniform with county officials as well as LA city officials. That request has just been put in. It's going to take some time for the National Guard to mobilize and respond here, but we can confirm that the process has started to request a National Guard response here in LA County. And just as you mentioned, at Mayor Garcetti's press conference earlier today, he specifically said he was not going to do that, and he did not anticipate doing that because, quote, this isn't 1992. Well, what we've seen happen over the last few hours, it's the situation is just deteriorating. There's looting going on everywhere. There's fires being set, clashes all over the place, and the mood has just changed, and they feel as we're going into sunset right now, the National Guard will be needed. They're not going to be able to respond right this second. They're going to have to gear up and mobilize, but that request has been put in now. And just to give you a live look at where we are at right now, this is Beverly Hills. This is Rodeo Drive, right at the intersection Santa Monica Boulevard. The Alexander McQueen store here on Rodeo Drive was looted here earlier this evening. Dozens of mass protesters, well, I'm not going to call them protesters, they're looters, got into the store, removed items, and just took off running. There's now a small police force here trying to guard it. They're really outnumbered by this crowd here. The ones on the outside, these are just protesters. They're just chanting things. They're just yelling, but some looters did come through here earlier today. I noticed there were about 4 or 5 Santa Monica police vehicles parked there earlier. earlier. I was here about an hour ago. So they called in help from Santa Monica, and I noticed some agitators come in, and they either slashed the tires or they did something to deflate the tires. But they got all the air out of all the tires on the Santa Monica police vehicles. So what you're looking at right now is essentially this big crowd of several hundred strong, just, you know, having a standoff with these officers who are guarding this end of Rodeo Drive. It's unclear what's happening at the other end, but we can confirm the Alexander McQueen store has been looted. We've seen the looting happening over at the Grove. And remember, yes.
Bill, I'm going to interrupt you for a moment. We're going to move back to the picture from where Bob DeCastro is. You see some of the police that are moving in to his location. This is near the Grove in the Fairfax district. Bob, go ahead.
Look to the right. Someone's being arrested right there. There's an arrest. That was a scary situation, I will tell you. So there was this standoff again between the protesters and the police. Chief Michael Moore is here. He is here, and he has been talking to the protesters, asking them. I listened to his conversation with them. He said, "What is your plan? What is your plan? What is your plan for this? Where do you plan on doing it?" He said, "If you plan on staying here a little later, and if rocks and bottles are being thrown at is what he told them." Tony's moving farther away from me. We're getting separated by the officers. Sorry about that. We're just getting separated. Chief Michael Moore is here, and he was talking to the protesters. He said they had a right to be here. He said, but if you want to be here later, and if bottles and rocks are being thrown, if bottles and rocks are being thrown at officers, he cannot guarantee their safety. He said he cannot guarantee their safety. As he was talking, and here more shots are being fired here with these rubber bullets. More shots are being fired. They're specifically going after. And as he was talking to them, more shots being fired. More being fired. As he was talking to them, someone threw a projectile or a bottle or rock at somebody, and then those bullets were fired. More than one person now being arrested. One arrest here, another person being arrested here. So these. She's saying, "Get off of me." She says, "I'm 21 years old. Get off of me. I'm 21 years old." As I said to you before, these are all lots of them, just young people out here from all walks of life. And what becomes a real emotional situation. I will tell you that there was even one protester. There was one protester who we were talking to, and she recognized. She says, "That's my cousin on the other side," meaning one of the officers on the other side. That woman was related to, not this particular woman, but the protester I was talking to. So you see, there are families that are really on both sides of these skirmish lines. And as I said, this is when it turns into a real tenuous situation, when you have these lines of people, and there's conversations that the conversation gets really heated, and then when a bottle or a rock or some kind of projectile is thrown at officers want to protect themselves as well, and that's when those rubber bullets are fired. And we saw multiple rounds that were fired here just a few moments ago. And what I have seen through this line is that the officers are quiet. They're really inspecting the crowd. They're looking very carefully, and they see who is the person that has thrown the rock or the bottle, and they find that person, and that's the person.
Bob DeCastro, we're going to go live to Kevin DeCoumi overhead, where we're seeing another store being looted. Kevin, go ahead, tell us where you're at.
Yeah, this is the 500 block of Fairfax here, and I'm trying to figure out what kind of store this is, but they were able to, the people were able to lift up the security gate, and they're getting under and pulling a lot of stuff out of there, but I'm just trying to figure out there's no name on the front of it there, so I'm trying to figure out exactly what store that is down below there, but they were able to lift up that security gate and start going in there and getting into it. So. But this is one of the places here on Fairfax that they have been able to get into. There's a lot of stuff that's just being emptied out. There's a fire down a little farther down here at Rosewood. It's just mostly just a bunch of trash that they've been throwing into the fire. Farther down at Oakwood is where the skirmish line is, down below, back down here, and they've been kind of slowly making their way north here. They're right in front of Cantor's, so they're kind of slowly making their way northbound up on Fairfax and trying to clear everybody out. But a couple of fires going here, and not all the stores are being broken into. Just one or two of them, as they find a place that they can try to get into, one that looks easy enough, I guess. But a lot of these other ones haven't been broken into. It's just like one every 20 or so.
And this is an area, of course, with so many different iconic spots around it. We just saw the Cantor's Deli, where earlier we saw some of the owners there handing out water to some of these protesters. Meanwhile, a few stores away, we see these looters and criminals that are trying to break into this store. And it seems kind of random, as what you are mentioning, where they're choosing to break in and what they're trying to take, as some of these people, I guess, take advantage of this moment when police resources are stretched so thin and try to take what they can. Christine, I mean, I think it's worth just taking a moment for all of us. I think it's hard to process what's happening here. This is happening so fast and with so much intensity in so many places. Not only here in Southern California, but around the country. We have all just lived through this trauma of coronavirus, which has so quickly shut down our economy, taken so many people out of work. It's been scary. More than 100,000 Americans have died. We had this video which ripped open an open wound. And now this just unbelievable display in the scenes of on the streets of Los Angeles. It's a lot to process how overwhelming the news has been all year long, starting this year, of course, with impeachment and Kobe Bryant and the presidential election, and now these massive stories. It's a lot to handle.
I've been talking to somebody just a few weeks ago about 2020, and he said, you know, 2020 for me hasn't started. It's going to start when things get better. And it just seems
Could be waiting a while.
It's one thing after another, although with this issue and the concern about policing and police brutality, the Black Lives Matter, for example, will tell you this is something we've been watching for years, for decades.
For centuries.
Okay, go on. Yes. Yeah. So point being, that issue is not something new to 2020, that concern. But you're right, with the coronavirus, just when things were starting to open up a bit, shopping was going to be allowed, hair salons. I know myself, I was going to go shopping in the area of the Fairfax district myself today, was going to run out and just kind of breathe a little bit and check things out. And then, not surprising with the protest in that area at noon today, that you still see crowds in the neighborhoods. I did speak with a business owner who has one of these businesses in the area where we're seeing these protests, and he says he's in his store. He says, this is our life. And so as we think of the protesters or the agitators or those who are looting as to what their motivation is, I'm thinking every business owner who has a shop on that street, on Fairfax or on Melrose, who they have spent their lifetimes investing their heart and their soul into creating a business for themselves and trying to keep their employees employed or with health care during this coronavirus crisis. And now to face this, it's just true devastation for them.
And they've been struggling so much in the last few months with so many of those businesses closed, those businesses now slowly being allowed to reopen. And now we see this. So now we see more senseless looting, people that are taking advantage of somebody's business and taking stuff that doesn't belong to them. And it is just, Rick Dickert, so heartbreaking and so infuriating to watch this. When you think of the people that are going to be hurt, innocent people that have absolutely nothing to do with the killing of a black man in Minneapolis. What is this store owner who's selling their clothing?
And the
what do they have to do with
George Floyd says, please don't stop. Let's bring this, let's get justice. Let's try these officers. And to see these pictures are so troubling. And Christine, you brought up a point, and I'm going to bring up 1992 again. And because you and I were both in it as very young journalists, there were shop owners that was their heart and soul, and they were armed. They were armed, and they had their guns, and they were trying to protect their well-being and their employees to try to keep them. But this is so unique and different, coming off of a pandemic we haven't seen in 100 years in this country, and a virtual shutdown of our economy, and all of these businesses being out of commission for a couple of months plus. Our lives changed. And now, just when there was a little glimmer of hope, this, and the economic toll that this is going to take, Christine and Alex, on our city, as I said earlier, for every patrol car that was burned, for every business that was burned, for every employee that can't go back to work and still needs that unemployment, as we see an LAPD helicopter circling overhead and more units arriving on scene. And thankfully, we're seeing that police presence. Yeah. This is going to take so long to recover from, not just from the pandemic, but from the riots that we have not seen since 1992. And there are officers, again, Los Angeles, arriving on the scene from all over Southern California, from areas that aren't seeing scenes like this. I know firsthand that firefighters, first responders, police officers who want to protect, who want to serve, who have good hearts, they have good hearts. They want to take control and bring this to a peaceful end so that we can bring this back. Every single business that's been burned, every single patrol car that's been burned, it's an awful situation. And to see this happen in our city, a city that I was born and raised in and I've covered for so many years.
It is heartbreaking, Rick. We want to go to Rick Lozano, who's been in downtown LA. And Rick, I know you have some news about some of the freeways that are being impacted by this.
Yeah, they certainly are, Alex. Just in the last hour or so, certainly an uptick in the activity here in the downtown area. Now, as we look behind me, you're going to be looking at 3rd Street as it enters the downtown area, and you can see there's a line of law enforcement vehicles guarding that street and also guarding the entrance to the 110 freeway southbound. Now, you can see cars coming out of downtown Los Angeles, but there are no cars going into the downtown area, and of course that is by design. Now, initially it was said that the curfew was going to affect the downtown area alone. We know now that all of Los Angeles is being affected by this curfew. Nonetheless, the downtown area is being cleared, and it would seem that there are thousands of people who perhaps have not heard that there is a curfew in effect starting at 8 p.m. or in just a few minutes as we speak, because there are still many cars out on the freeways and on the surface streets in and around downtown Los Angeles. We have activity overhead. We have a number of helicopters in the air. And thanks to a number of social media platforms, we've been able to keep tabs on a number of hot spots in and around the downtown area. For instance, a little bit earlier, up around the 101 freeway and Coronado Street, a large gathering of protesters there who apparently were trying to enter the freeway, to enter the 101 freeway at that point. That did not happen, but a lot more activity in the downtown area. I'm getting some interference, so I'm going to send it back to you. Are you guys trying to?
All right, Rick, thank you. We're gonna go now to Bill Maloogian, where there's been some activity in Beverly Hills. Bill Maloogian.
Yeah, Alex, good evening. We have some activity here at Rodeo Drive in Beverly Hills. Police are now starting to move this crowd backwards. They declared this an unlawful assembly. It looks like they're using either tear gas or smoke bombs to start pushing this crowd back. We've seen some bottles start being thrown. There is a significantly bigger group of police officers here than when you first saw us about 20 minutes ago. But you can see there's a very sizable crowd here. Half the crowd took off running when it appears some flashbangs went off, but some of them have come back. I'm watching them throw, it appears to be water bottles back at the police officers. But again, there are hundreds of people here at Rodeo Drive. This has been declared an unlawful assembly, and Rodeo Drive has been looted this evening. It's one of the many areas that has been looted already tonight. They broke into the Alexander McQueen store, but now more police resources appear to be here. They're in crowd control gear. You can see those bottles being thrown at police. They're blocking them with their shields, and you're just watching this live with us. This is escalating. This was mostly a peaceful crowd for the most part. All right, people are going to start running. That guy just got shot in the arm with with a rubber bullet. You can see him wincing. So you can see there's sheriff's deputies, and it would appear it's Beverly Hills police or Santa Monica police that are holding the line here as this crowd, again, stays at Rodeo Drive. This is an area that was looted. More police resources have arrived, and it looks like they're really going to try to hold the line here and try to enforce this unlawful assembly. They've kind of let the crowd just stand there and gather for the last hour or so, but now they're taking a little bit more of an aggressive approach. It appears they're either firing pepper balls or foam bullets. I can't tell what they are. But you're watching this live with us. Again, people still throwing water bottles. It looks like they've successfully been able to clear out the main mass of the crowd on Rodeo Drive. Someone's throwing fireworks now. I'm not sure if that was... Okay, yeah, there's people throwing fireworks. Unless that's a flash... No, those are fireworks, yeah. Sorry, we have some cars blocking our view. But yeah, it would appear those are protesters throwing some fireworks towards the police, or they're just setting them off in the street. It's kind of hard to tell. But again, those officers, they're not really advancing right now. They're just kind of holding the line here at Rodeo Drive and Santa Monica Boulevard. More bottles being thrown right now. And trying to see. Most of the crowd is still here.
Bill, we're going to wrap you for a second, and we will get back to you as we now approach 8 o'clock in special coverage from Fox 11.
Police and protesters battling on the skirmish lines, patrol cars in flames, the mayor of L.A. calling for calm.
To let the world know who we are and the world that we want to create.
Now, Fox 11's special coverage of the unrest in Los Angeles. Good evening. I'm Christine Devine. We thank you so much for being with us for this special coverage. One thing that we can tell you right now, it is 8 p.m. That citywide curfew for the entire city of Los Angeles is now in effect. We've also gotten this news that Pasadena has also called for this 8 p.m. curfew. It's until 5:30 in the morning. The city of L.A., the mayor saying if you are out on the streets past 8 p.m., which is right now, you can be arrested.
Good evening. I'm Alex Michelson. We are witnessing together one of the most chaotic nights in the history of Southern California, the most chaotic night since the 1992 LA riots, as there are multiple different fires that have been set, looting in multiple areas throughout Southern California. Police have clashed with protesters. All of this started as a peaceful protester of thousands of people earlier today protesting the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis. Los Angeles, like so many cities around the country, have been having massive protests because of that shooting, which so many people viewed as unjustified. The day after the police officer responsible for that, not a shooting, I'm sorry, just the death that they viewed as unjustified, the man responsible for that was arrested, but many of the protesters want him to be charged with first-degree murder, not third-degree murder, and want the 3 other officers involved to be arrested as well. Some of that message has been lost tonight as we have seen lots of violence from agitators, anarchists, whatever you want to call them, that have gotten within these protesters and taken advantage of a situation where the police are stretched so thin that the National Guard is being called in. Local officials have asked the National Guard for help. Earlier today, the mayor of Los Angeles, Eric Garcetti, said, I'm not going to do that. We don't need to bring in the National Guard. But clearly, this situation has deteriorated to the point where the National Guard will be coming in eventually. And Christine, it'll be interesting to see what happens now that we've hit 8 o'clock.
Yeah, let's take a look at the store that we are watching right now on Fairfax being looted. This is a sneaker store called Flight Club. And if you go up and down Fairfax in this area, there's all kinds of little stores that have trendy clothing and shoes, and they're just kind of a fun area to go shopping if you're looking for some of the cool, trendy brands. Well, you're looking at the mess out there out front of that store after people came in, and you can still see them walking out with boxes or bags of clothing there. So as we are watching this, we are watching people's businesses, their livelihoods fall under attack here in our city as we are now at 8 p.m. with that curfew now in effect. Unfortunately, there's not enough law enforcement to move into all of the areas of concern right now. Look at the skirmish line there right there of LAPD officers just, what, half a block away. But with that curfew, you have those people there that are still in that location of that store, still going through that store. And somebody right now is probably watching that thinking, I work at that store, I own that store, or I shop at that store. So that's what is happening in our city right now as we look at LAPD in two different locations. We have the Fairfax area. Our Bill Malusian was reporting from Beverly Hills. We have our Rick Lozano, who is in downtown LA. But with that citywide curfew, this is what we saw in 1992. We saw a curfew. I remember being there out on the streets where we think of our streets being empty now with the coronavirus, especially at the forefront of the virus and news of the virus. The streets so empty, so it would not feel unusual to you. But I'm thinking back to 1992 where you didn't have that visual. You didn't have that scene. And to drive down the street, say at 9 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night, and literally there would be nobody on the street. Now, right now, it's still light out. Right now, the curfew has just taken effect by, 4 minutes? Right now, you have people still who are, social media and taking their selfies and doing what they want to do to protest. You can see people right there setting up their own barriers of some sort on the small screen there. But this is still developing in our city. But the LAPD is warning you that this curfew is in effect. We understand from the media relations of LAPD that the word has come out that this includes the news media. So that's a development because we have been trying to bring this story to you. But I'm reading now this update that the curfew between 8 p.m. and 5:30 a.m. tomorrow includes the news media. So that'll be interesting to see what happens with that. Bob DeCastro live there on the scene. Bob?
Well, I can only tell you from what we've been seeing here, and the officers, they've been good to us. I will say that we've been here, so I haven't heard anything here on the ground in terms of us being asked to leave as a result of that curfew. It does not look as if this crowd is dissipating. In fact, it just looks like they're standing their ground. A few moments ago, we saw this line of officers. They moved a little bit further. And looks like someone from the crowd had thrown another projectile at officers. I got some clarification before what was thrown at officers the last time around when I talked to you about a half hour ago, and it looks like there's like fireworks and M80s, and here's more. This is an M80 that's being thrown right now. It's very loud. It's almost like a flashbang grenade, but we'll see if this explodes. Some of them are very loud. And there you see, they're throwing fireworks, different types of projectiles at these officers, and these officers will not hesitate to fire back with their foam bullets. So, especially if they see someone, we've heard a lot of fireworks that were set off here, but here goes the line again, being moved even further. Some of these fireworks that are being thrown at officers, or that had been thrown at officers, as I said before, I thought it was a flashbang grenade that typically you might hear from police. But it wasn't. It was some kind of a giant firework that was thrown by a protester, and that's why the cops immediately moved the line even closer, and a couple of arrests were made here. I haven't seen any officers get hurt. Well, that's the good news. But yeah, as darkness begins to descend here, I will tell you that it does not appear that these protesters are going anywhere. In fact, you talked about the barricade that they've been putting up, so they would typically take things that are already in the street, from trash cans to, you see all those scooters. They're taking the scooters and putting them on the street here. They're putting various types of barricades or just debris and putting them on the street. So as the line of officers continues to move in the eastward direction, they're trying to break up those lines as the officers approach here. So just sort of a standoff kind of situation here, and you wonder how long this will go on as the night continues.
Bob, as we continue to watch your picture here, this information from the mayor of Los Angeles, Eric Garcetti, says he's asking Governor Gavin Newsom to send 500 members of the National Guard to Los Angeles in response to scenes like this, where you have people throwing projectiles at law enforcement officers. If you heard the mayor speak earlier today, he talked about the law enforcement officers and his police officers and his concern for them. And as we saw some of them step back as a projectile was thrown towards them, Bob, I'm thinking too that these are sons and daughters and mothers and fathers and husbands and wives that are out there in uniform wanting to go home safely to their families tonight.
And Christine, just to add to what you were saying, Bill Malusian is reporting that the sheriff has asked for 1,000 National Guard soldiers and that they are expected to arrive in Los Angeles with the next 4 to 5 hours. So they're in the process of gearing up, and that we should be seeing them, it sounds like, in the middle of the night tonight. Bob, go ahead.
And I've heard that being talked about, even talking to some protesters here, how, you know, they're feeling a lot of pain too, because some of their loved ones, some of their relatives are, so to speak, on the other side, are officers. And I know we talked about over the years the differences in, you know, you've been talking about the LA riots from long ago, but the police department is a very different complexion than the police departments of years past. And if you really got a closer look at the line of police officers, it's a very diverse group of people. So you have families on both sides of this issue. And I know that we're talking about something that is systemic, something that is inherent, and that people want to have changed. But it is a really different dynamic that you're talking about here when you're having these people facing off each other, and some of them are actually people who might actually be related. It doesn't look like, as I said at this point, that these protesters are going anywhere. One thing I will tell you, again, when people wake up tomorrow and they leave their homes, these streets will look nothing like they looked before. I mean, there's every wall, every building spray painted, every street spray painted, things damaged, destroyed. It looks almost like a war zone through many of these streets here. 3rd Street, Melrose, Beverly. There's going to be a lot of devastation when they walk through these streets tomorrow, when people are out and about and surveying the damage.
And those are
really
some pretty high-end shopping areas too that are big for tourists. And we continue to look right now at these live pictures from Skyfox. More looting that is underway. These people destroying other people's businesses that they've worked really hard to build, and now groups of them running in to try to take whatever they can. This happening after more than 2 months of lockdowns. So many people that abided by these orders now out of the house for the first time. Maybe some pent-up anger about that situation as well, making their way to try to steal other people's property. Some more news. You know, in LA County, there are more than 80 cities, Christine. Los Angeles County obviously being the biggest and being one of the biggest in the country. But we just got news from Culver City that they are also under this curfew order. So we know of Culver City, West Hollywood, Santa Monica, Los Angeles, all major cities in Los Angeles County that are now under this 8 p.m. curfew.
You know, it is heartbreaking to watch this looting happening here in our city, and Bob DeCastro talked about the changed landscape of Los Angeles. And if you think back to 1992, where we had things in our city, we were at the epicenter of the situation and the concern, where tonight it's Minneapolis. But we're seeing this in our city. And as we think of the National Guard being called, the National Guard request to come to our city, I am taken back to 1992, where we had that situation as well. And it's a visual you'll never forget. So we're looking right now. It is 8:13 by my clock here, and you see the crowd there still on the streets. The officers there, as it is getting to be nightfall, which does also change the picture when it's nightfall, when it comes to safety and what you can see. Bob DeCastro, it looks like the crowd perhaps is moving back a bit.
You know, they created a much larger barricade here. They threw it down, and it looks like they're stepping back just a bit. And moving back a little further, but the officers, that line has not moved up at all. I don't know if they're trying to get the officers to move forward towards this makeshift barricade that they made here along 3rd Street. I don't know if they think that that's going to break up their line or if they're just trying to encourage them to move this forward, but they did move several feet now beyond this makeshift barricade of all of this stuff and debris that they took from several of the businesses here, umbrellas, air conditioning units, orange cones, hose lines, you name it, all on the street here. And you know, if the skirmish line, if the officers were to go beyond where they are right now, they would have to break up just a bit to go past this. And they're putting more here, and they're putting more here.
All right, Bob, we'll get back to you in a moment. We also want to bring Leo Terrell back into the conversation, a longtime civil rights attorney who does legal analysis for us here on Fox 11. This cause of police violence and protecting the African American community is the cause of his life. Leo, you're watching this with us. This has only gotten so much worse since a few hours ago when we talked. I mean, you got to have a pit in your stomach right now.
I've been watching your coverage, excellent coverage throughout the evening. I do have that pit in my stomach, and I recall our conversation we had a couple hours ago where I said the National Guard is going to be needed, and the mayor has reversed himself. I don't want to criticize the mayor, but his press conference was toothless. Because as you correctly describe what's going on right now, let's be honest, this is not protesting. These are criminals, looting, as you correctly described. And as Christine and Rick talked about the 1992 riot, this is more strategic. It's more tactful. And I've said throughout the last couple of hours is that the LAPD and the Sheriff Department do not have the resources to impose a curfew on 4 million people. I am hurting. If I wasn't on the air right now, I'd be crying because I was born and raised in the city, public school, and I see people of all colors participating in activities that have absolutely nothing to do with the tragic the tragic death of George Floyd.
Leo, I feel you with the pain and the emotion of it. When I heard our reporter Bill Malutian say there was the call for the National Guard, I wanted to cry right then and there because I have such a strong visual from being there on the streets in 1992. And it's something that you don't see much in your lifetime. And to think that we are here again, that we need to protect our city, we need to protect the people of Los Angeles from those who want to do destruction and those who want to cause pain, who want to loot businesses. So we're looking at projectiles of some sort. Fireworks, okay. So Leo, how does this play out with the curfew at now 8:16 p.m. that went into effect about 16 minutes ago? How does that play out?
Well, Christina, as I mentioned, it's toothless. As we are talking right now, it is 17 minutes past a curfew, and you have people who are totally disregarding the curfew. The LAPD and the LA Sheriff Department does not have the enforcement mechanism, i.e. resources, to enforce it. So therefore, most of their resources are in these what you call hot spots, not knowing what's going to happen for the remaining part of the evening. So it's a toothless curfew. It applies to those law-abiding citizens. You know, we always assume that a law is in effect. Criminals do not respect laws. They violate the law. And you're seeing that played out on Fox 11. These individuals are violating the law.
And what is the legal, some people might wonder this, the legal rationale for a curfew? Does the government have the power actually to do that?
Yes, the government has the power. These are the powers of any state government to impose emergency orders to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the public. And that is what the mayor is relying upon because we have a safety issue, just like when the emergency powers during the pandemic. These are emergency powers given for this type of discretionary action. And that's what the mayor has applied, and he's within his right. The problem is the enforcement mechanism does not exist because of the lack of resources.
So, Leo, as we continue to talk with you, this word just coming in about the Metro system, the metro bus and the rail service. Because of the curfew, that's been suspended for the rest of the night. So I'm thinking of anybody who might need those services to get to some kind of work, who's now going to not be able to get to work. You know, we think of sometimes people who work at a hospital or in some kind of business that they do work a Saturday night, that they need to get somewhere or to get home. They're not going to be able to do so with metro, bus and rail suspended for the rest of the night. Leo, you know, you and I have been around for a minute here. And I think of some of the young people that I mentor from time to time who are very angry and very upset by what's going on in our country. And I'm trying to speak to the young people about this moment in time. If you could offer some words of wisdom as to how this plays out in history, because I'm thinking of the 1992 riots. In fact, there's a picture that I have in Koreatown reporting that's been used in a textbook. So this is a moment in history. So for our young adults, what would you say?
For our young adults, I would say the same thing that you've been doing all your life and what I've been doing as a civil rights attorney. This is a setback, but we have to almost redouble our efforts to continue to impress upon this next generation of people to say that we have to move past this and become a better society. How? Is that there are powerful ways to work within the system, This is why I've been committed, you've been committed, and others have been committed for such a long period of time. And that is the key, to show young people that there is an alternative, a way that will create positive reform. And I got news, it's time for you and I to pass the mantle so that we can have young people do a more leadership role and to avoid the pitfalls that we have fallen into, such as this current situation, so that they can avoid this. They have to learn from the mistakes of our path and move forward.
Well, I think too, Leo, as we hear the unemployment numbers that have been given out with the coronavirus.
40 million people.
Yeah, and then to think of shops being looted where somebody would be going to work perhaps even this weekend, some of those retail stores, to think of somebody's business or their inventory gone. Now, obviously, we're talking about a greater issue besides the material and somebody's clothing or their tennis shoes. However, this is about the economy. And back in '92, the economy was hurt. Our communities were hurt. Our communities of color were hurt by situations like this that took so long to rebuild in some areas. I mean, Magic Johnson is among the entrepreneurs who went into certain communities and created businesses like a fitness center, a movie theater, a Starbucks. Now, we're not there right now where things are gone, but these are businesses that are trying to provide employment for people. And that's what concerns me.
And well before today, Christine, Mayor Garcetti has talked about the fact that it took 20 years to rebuild a lot of those areas. 20 years.
Well, you know, the irony is a step back, and what this hurt people of color. This type of destruction, this type of misconduct hurts business opportunities in areas involving people of color. And this is the part that pains me the most, because I'm looking at people that look like me out there doing destructive acts. But it hurts inside.
Leo, I just want to say one thing. I just got to also add that we're also seeing people not of color. So I think that's a big issue, and that has been a concern from people of color that have been texting me all morning, that who are some of these people, especially across the country, that are doing some of this looting?
And a lot of them are not.
Well, you're true. And, you know, the city of LA is a perfect mix of all different types of people, and that's one of the reasons why I love this city. But my point here is that the poorest people, the people who need the jobs, the people who need the employment are going to be hurt by this.
Yep.
And for me, being a minority in the city and a person who have benefited from the schools and the education and the employment opportunities, I just want those opportunities available for everyone. I take a tremendous amount of pride of being a civil rights attorney because I want to represent the rights of everyone, regardless of race, color, creed, national origin. And I will always do that for all people. That's the pain that I suffer right now.
Leo Terrell, thank you. I think one of the leaders earlier, Christine, that Sheriff Villanueva had a press conference with a bunch of community leaders, including several prominent African-American leaders, and one of them said it this way: the people who suffer the most are the people who can least afford it. In referring to these looting,
true.
those are the people who are really going to be suffering after all this violence that we're witnessing right now. Leo, thank you. We'll check back in with you in a moment. We appreciate all of your wisdom tonight. Bob DeCastro on the streets. Bob, it is now dark out, which always changes the nature of this story. Yeah. We are now in what's supposed to be a curfew, although it doesn't seem like a lot of people are following that. What's the feel like on the ground now?
Yeah. Well, you know, as I sit here and I'm watching, because some of the chanting has sort of died down, so now they're no longer chanting. Some of the crowds have actually moved away from the line of police officers, so they moved back along 3rd Street. There are a number of people still hanging out here. Lots of fireworks are being shot. People are kind of cruising around the area, and so they're just kind of loitering in the area. Just down the street over here, we saw more graffiti, a number of shops over here, a number of buildings, smashed windows. Kind of eerie when you see all of the signage. Kind of eerie when you see some of the signage there that says for people to socially distance, to make sure you're not sick before you go into this restaurant, and it's completely smashed. And so now here at this corner, this is at Martel, Hauser Boulevard and 3rd. People are kind of just hanging out and cruising, to be perfectly honest. There's not that much chanting or any of that. They've actually moved away from the officer and just kind of loitering. One of the other things that kind of strikes me as disappointing, I would say, is that there's a lot of really young people out here. I would say that there appear to be a lot of minors out here as well, and you're wondering what minors are doing out in a situation like this. You know, really unsafe for them to be out here. But it's a strange atmosphere.
It speaks, Bob, to how much social media is driving a lot of this as well. With them organizing via social media, telling people where to go via that, and that's where a lot of people have gotten this. I mean, even Gavin Newsom yesterday talked about the fact that his daughter showed him the video of George Floyd being killed on TikTok. As a 10-year-old kid, she's watching it on TikTok and showed it to him, and that was one of the ways that he saw that incident. So this is affecting so many different generations.
And it's kind of the world we live in also, right? With the social media, which also is sort of bizarre to me when you're seeing people protest, and a lot of it is stuff that they want to put on social media with their signs and taking pictures with the cops behind them, or with, you know, smiling with with other groups of protesters and things like that. So it is, you know, it's kind of the way people are living their lives right now.
Well, guys,
and you also think about, Christine, just to add real quickly, the fact that young people, when you're young, you want to be out, you want to be with your friends, you want to be partying, you want to be doing stuff. These young people have been stuck inside, many with their parents, nonstop for the last 2.5 months, and there's a lot of pent-up hormones, there's pent-up anger, there's pent-up everything that may be also being released into the streets after all of this, and that may be a factor in the size of this as well.
I was talking about that in my home today. One thing about how much people have been at home with nothing to do, and finally you have that energy to possibly even go out to a restaurant this weekend or shopping this weekend, and then what happened with the death of George Floyd, it changed things. But Bob, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was thinking the same thing. You know, the psyche now of the city, of the country now exhausted and tired, not just from what we saw with the George Floyd situation, and that's been going on for so long, but also exhausted. Also just exhausted of having of the stay-at-home orders, of having to deal with the pandemic, and things just percolating up with nothing to do. People are losing their jobs. People are frustrated in so many different ways. People are anxious. We're looking at a coffee bean. Here's a coffee bean, and they're smashing the windows of this coffee bean here at the corner of Hazard. And Now it's just being destructive. To be perfectly honest, they're just taking some of the things here from the Coffee Bean. Oh wait, they're trying to open. They took the register. They took the register, and they're smashing, I think, part of the cash register on the ground here to try to open the cash register, and I could hear the coins jingling inside. But yes, so if you know this Coffee Bean on the corner of 3rd and Martel or Hauser, this has been damaged.
So this curfew clearly not in effect where Bob DeCastro is. Supposedly there's supposed to be a curfew right now, clearly not being enforced as we see more violence in the streets there. If we can, I'd love to bring Susan Hirasuna into the conversation. I'm not sure if she can hear us right now because I know she's been following this idea that this is just one of many massive protests that are happening around the country. We're hearing about problems in Dallas, Chicago, Brooklyn. Susan, I know you've been following some of what's happening around the country, and it's similar to what we're seeing here.
Susan, let us know. Yeah. Let us know when you're ready. All right, so as we're looking here, this is a restaurant, Lala's, down there in the Fairfax district. Okay, back live to the Coffee Bean shop. Okay, I'm not sure who this person is, but they seem to be standing there at the door as if guarding the door in some way.
I think Bob? it may be Bob's security. We have some security that's working with our crews to try to keep them safe.
Yeah,
we see a tree on fire right there by Lala's. Hopefully firefighters can get there quickly to try to protect that establishment as well. You think about some of these restaurants and places that have been hurt so badly by coronavirus and have not been able to open for 2 months. Tonight was supposed to be their first night to be able to open. And instead, we have a curfew and looting and now a fire out front. Your heart goes out to these people.
It really does. I mean, Lala's is an Argentine grill. It's a restaurant that probably would be open right now as dine-in service was allowed, or perhaps curbside service. I've been there before. So we're thinking of, as we watch this, these are places that many of us have gone to. If you've been to the Fairfax district to go shopping on Melrose, perhaps, or to the Grove, you saw that tree there on fire, hoping the restaurant is safe, that everybody there is safe. I got to think that anybody who was going there to the restaurant left a long time ago. All right, Bill Malusian has been in Beverly Hills. Bill, what do you have for us?
Yeah, Christine, good evening. I can successfully report to you that LA County Sheriff's deputies and Beverly Hills police have been able to clear out the entire crowd of protesters here at Rodeo Drive. They used a lot of tear gas, and unfortunately, Sam and I, my photographer, we caught some of it to the face. Just to describe it to you, it's almost, imagine taking a spoonful of cinnamon and just inhaling all of it. It does not feel good. Your whole face burns. It gets in all your pores. It gets into your eyes. But take a look. They're on the other side of the street right now. They've been able to advance ahead and completely push that crowd out. About a minute ago, they used a ton of tear gas over there to clear everybody out, and then a draft of wind kind of brought it down the street to us here. But it's good news because some order has been restored here. Again, this is Rodeo Drive at Santa Monica Boulevard. This is an area that was being looted earlier. But Sam, if we can pan to the left, they are still stationing here at Beverly Drive and Santa Monica Boulevard. And then those officers and those deputies we showed across the street from us where that crowd was earlier, where those fireworks were going on, that entire area has successfully been cleared out now. So some order finally restored here, at least in Beverly Hills, guys.
Bill, I feel for you. I've been in that situation where I've had tear gas on me as well. It is a painful thing, which is why it can be a pretty effective police tactic. Beverly Hills police over the years are known as some of the stricter cops out there on everything from parking to enforcement of homelessness to many other things to protect a lot of those very expensive stores that are there. And once again, it appears that Beverly Hills police have taken some of the most dramatic action that we have not seen as much. Rick Dickert, let's go to you.
And that's a very good point, because every single different jurisdiction takes a different role in this, Alex. There are some officers that are more passive and they just want to bring a peaceful end. They don't want to incite. And other officers, other jurisdictions will say, hey, this is our town. This is our community. These are our business owners that have worked, as both you and Christine have said, for years to establish these businesses, just coming back from the COVID-19 crisis, just reopening it, trying to regain some semblance of normalcy. And then this happens. So they want to protect, and that is their job, to protect and to serve. These officers, and I keep mentioning this, and we've seen the horrific scenes, and again, listening to Leo Terrell, because his voice is paramount in all of this. He's a civil rights activist who really tells the story, and I've heard it from when I was a kid journalist back in the early 90s with the Rodney King situation to now. There are the vast majority, we're talking 97, 98+% of officers who are good policing officers who want to take care of us. And that's what they're doing. They are hired. They get their salaries from the city to protect and to serve. And they're going to try to protect those businesses and those business owners. Look at the LAFD arriving on the scene here, who have been assaulted themselves, their lines pulled and burned. They're just trying to put out fires. These are firefighters who want to save your homes, who want to provide CPR for one of your family members who may be in a horrible health situation. And the dichotomy here is so unheartening. And I'm watching this from home and seeing this. This is my city. I was born and raised. I was born in Inglewood in 1968, and I've seen a lot and covered a lot. And this is unlike any other, except for what I saw in 1992 after the Rodney King beating.
You know, one thing about law enforcement, Rick, that you mentioned, law enforcement officers, is it's been noted in national media of the number of police officers and chiefs, and including Sheriff Alex Villanueva, who's spoken out against what happened to George Floyd in Minneapolis. It's been noted how many have come forward. Yeah, I mean, I had officers that have reached out to me personally. I've seen them post on my Facebook page as well. One person I had a long conversation with yesterday said, I got on the job to be part of the change. We are on the job to be a part of making it the LAPD that we want it to be. And so when you talk about the officers who are there trying to do some good work, I think of those who mentor youth at Hollenbeck. I think of the officer who's works Skid Row by choice, who's been called by national media the angel of Skid Row. I think of the officers who do so many projects to uplift the community, and they might now be out there on the streets trying to keep them safe for us.
And it's not just the officers, Christine. It's the family of George Floyd have spoken up as well, and I've heard it as well. And I know so many police officers and firefighters, as you do, Christine, working the city since our early days, and my connection with the first responders and our Firehouse Friday, and honoring our police officers from LAPD, from the slopes to the shore, all jurisdictions, and they want to protect and serve. And this right here, as we look at this Adidas store on Melrose Avenue, as the curfew broke at 8 o'clock, close to 40 hours ago, this is occurring in our city. And again, we're journalists. We just have to tell the story. We get emotional because it is our town. It is our town, Alex and Christine, and we were watching this, and it's disheartening, and we can't give our own really personal opinion to it, but it's a situation for me that is hard to watch. It's hard to watch, and I can't get into the mindset of the people who are doing what we're seeing, and I have to just be a reporter where I've been from Skyfox from back in the late 1990s until now, Rick, and this is a tough situation. No police presence here, but speaking of
Skyfox, Rick, we're gonna go to Kevin Takumi, who is in Skyfox right now, who can narrate what he's seeing. Kevin.
Yeah, we're on Melrose here, just about Alta Vista to Formosa here, and a lot of stores have been broken into here. This one, Altiva watch store, that's been broken into, and fires have been set in the middle of the roadways here. You can see a lot of people still wandering in the streets here. A couple other businesses have been broken into all along Melrose, and you can see once again the fire department did show up to try to put these away. They started taking rocks and bottles, so they pulled out, and they're just going to let these dumpsters burn. And then one tree that was outside of Walla's also caught fire. The police are just down the street here. They were taking some looters that were in over here. They were taking them into custody just off of Fuller. They took 10 people in custody. And so they're about to start moving here. They're going to move eastbound and try to keep getting, trying to push people east on Melrose towards La Brea, but you see people still just trying to get in here and get out. They're just breaking in here. Cars have been pulling up. So you see somebody in a motorcycle pulling up. Most of the people are starting to move now. That since the skirmish line is starting to push its way to the east here, but several businesses alongside Melrose have been looted, and they're just, you can see that they're just going from business to business here, whichever ones they can get into down here. A couple of them have been restaurants, and a couple of most of them clothing stores. The one that they're in right now is a nail salon. You can see they're going in and out right there. So all businesses of all varieties here on Melrose being looted at this point.
All right, Kevin.
Quite a tweet I just want to share, Christine, for a moment, from the LA County Sheriff's Department Twitter page. It says, curfew in place in LA, anarchists go home. We love our city, we love our country, we want everybody to be safe. So that, that I think is the truth in a lot of these situations. There are anarchists who are on the street who really don't care that much about the George Floyd message one way or another, who see this as an opportunity to raise problems, who don't like the man, who want to give a middle finger to society, and are seeing this as their way of expressing that and maybe stealing some stuff in the process. And what they're doing is really, really hurting a lot of innocent people, hardworking people who have spent their lives trying to build up these businesses and are going to be badly hurt by what we are seeing, an out-of-control mob taking over the streets of Southern California.
So it started as a Black Lives Matter protest, then ends with a tweet like that where it says anarchists go home. Okay, we are watching a couple of different hot spots in our city tonight. We're going to go to Rick Lozano, who's in downtown LA. Rick, what do you have?
Well, Christine, and good evening, everyone. After what happened last night, law enforcement certainly came ready to defend the downtown area of Los Angeles. Take a look behind me in the distance. You can see a number of law enforcement cars that have gathered. This is on 3rd Street into the downtown area. All cars going into downtown are not being allowed to enter. You can exit the downtown area, but you cannot go in. That's 3rd Street. One block to the south on 4th Street, the same thing. Another blockage with dozens of law enforcement cars blocking the entrance to downtown. Only cars coming out of downtown are allowed to do so. And there are a few hot spots in the downtown area. Earlier, we had some loud explosions, presumably flashbang grenades, to disperse some crowds that were gathering in the area. But it seems to be quieting down now. We assume that other key entry points to the downtown area are also being shut down. Law enforcement presence, I got to tell you, it is very impressive as squad cars continue to crisscross the downtown area on surface streets, and then also on the freeways in and around the downtown area, the 110, the 109, 101, and the 5 freeway in and around downtown, all being monitored so that people don't try to enter those freeways. This is going to be the case all night long. But I got to tell you, compared to what happened in the downtown area last night, things are very quiet here now. Law enforcement all over the place surrounding the perimeter of downtown, not letting anybody in. Of course, we're going to be here throughout the course of the evening to keep you posted on things. That's it from downtown. We'll send it back to you in the studio.
And it's interesting, Rick has his jacket or his vest on to identify himself as a member of the news media, because right now, of course, there is a curfew in place and people are not supposed to be out on the streets. Thank you, Rick. We hope you stay safe. Back to Kevin Katumi. We're looking now at this 7204 Melrose, another store being hit.
Sorry, we're listening to there's a fire breaking out down the street as well. So you can see this one here. This is the unit at on Melrose and Formosa here. They were able to break through the security gates. People are still going in and out of it, and police are still down the way. They're still waiting for some more reinforcements to get over here. I don't know how much is actually left in that business there, because there's not much left of it. They were also breaking into a nail salon that was across the street and just taking whatever they could, I guess, inside there. And you can see right now nobody's really coming out anymore. It looks like it's been cleared out entirely. So, but people are starting to move down the street here. LAPD slowly kind of making their way in as they can get more reinforcements in here. But that street, that one on the corner there, that's a restaurant. It doesn't look like it's been broken into yet. So, but you can see as they are starting to move down the street here, there's just more and more people that are starting to gather in the area. There's still a lot of car traffic that is coming in back and forth here, and the fires still continue down here in the roadway. Fire department was not able to put those out because they were starting to take rocks and bottles from people as the fire engines just pulled up there. So right now it's still out of control. You can see LAPD is starting to make their way south here, but they just don't have enough people to move down the streets here and start taking them. They have several, about 10 in custody here that they were able to grab in those businesses that were being looted back there, but they're still waiting for reinforcements so they can move down the street.
Well, when you speak, Kevin, of reinforcements, we have the word that the LA mayor is saying that the National Guard will be deployed overnight. And if you're one of these business owners, you might very well welcome the National Guard. Supervisor Janice Hahn also releasing a statement saying, I lived through the Watts riots in 1965. I lived through the 1992 uprising. I remember the pain this city and its residents went through. I'm going to just kind of sum it up. She says, this is not a protest anymore. Please don't destroy our beloved Los Angeles. This is not a protest anymore.
Yeah, and we have not heard from the governor of California about this. I've reached out to his team offering him the opportunity to call in and share his views with the people of Los Angeles. We've also extended an offer to the mayor of Los Angeles, hoping he will call in as well. An extraordinary challenge for the leaders of California at a time that has already been a historic challenge for the people of California, now being compounded with what we are seeing on the streets play out live. One of those areas of concern is Beverly Hills. The police there have acted a little bit stronger than in some other areas. They deployed tear gas on the crowd. Bill Maloogian is there. He unfortunately experienced some of that tear gas himself. Bill, how are you feeling now, first off, and what are you seeing now?
Alex, good to go now. It only lasts a couple of minutes. I got tear gas back in 2016 during the Charlotte riot, so I learned you got to walk it off. You can't really rub your eyes. But back here in Beverly Hills at Rodeo Drive, this is finally a little bit of law and order out here. The crowd has been dispersed. That tear gas was highly effective. This entire park was full of hundreds of protesters this same time an hour ago, but now take a look. There's nobody here. It's just law enforcement. The roads are almost opening back up, even though there's supposed to be a curfew in effect here. But you can kind of see, Sam, if we can pan over here to the left off of Beverly, it's kind of a little bit of a breather moment for law enforcement. They were successfully able to clear out this crowd. They're just kind of standing around taking a little bit of a break. They still have blockades and barricades all set up here throughout the Beverly Hills area because of all the high-end stores, some of which have already been looted. But again, not one single protester remaining in the area, which is a pretty significant achievement considering how many of them were here about an hour ago. But as we were talking about, they took a little bit more of an aggressive stance with that tear gas and with shooting some of the foam bullets, and it was very effective. The protesters didn't want any part of that tear gas, and I can understand why.
All right, Bill, thank you. Glad to hear that things are getting a little bit better. That seems to be the only area of progress that we've had in a long time. We're now looking at firefighters trying to put out what's to be, it looks like a business that may be on fire right now. This is just one of the many scenes of lawlessness. We want to show you some video from a little earlier. This was during the daylight hours of a Whole Foods that was looted, and just you see the crowd here, just a sense of the craziness of today, just breaking through the doors and going in there to take whatever they could. You know, I guess they just really wanted organic food.
But here, this is the scene that baffled me, because what caused these people to suddenly rush out? Was there security inside the store? We do know LAPD started approaching. Maybe they got word that LAPD was coming, but they almost seemed like they saw something inside the store and turned around.
You know what that looks like to me? I mean, this is a pure speculation. That there was a security guard in there that was armed and shot, put up a gunshot into the air or something like that as a warning to people, and people maybe heard that and said, let's get out of here.
Yeah, and somebody fell right there. Looks like they're being arrested perhaps, or someone's trying to help them get out of the area. Okay, yeah, there you saw LAPD response right there, getting the rest of the people out of there.
I mean, that was clearly provoked by something. If only we could hear that response, but it had to have been something pretty dramatic to cause all those people who had worked that hard to get in there to then rush out of it. So that was the Whole Foods. We also watched a Nordstrom's being looted. Let's show you some video of that, which was not far from where that Whole Foods are. This is near the Grove. Now we're, of course, looking at live pictures from Skyfox. This is a challenging night for all of us. We'll get you that video in a little bit. But in the Grove, we saw people just running into a Nordstrom's in that location.
Alex, I lived through that with the '92 riots, where I was inside a Macy's that is no longer, I don't even think the mall is there anymore, but I was in that store at about maybe 9, 10 o'clock as it was being looted, as people were grabbing racks of clothing and shoes, and somebody with a TV walked right by me. And I could not believe my eyes to be inside a Macy's and to see it being cleaned out by people who were just stealing racks and racks of stuff. And suddenly an LAFD fire truck pulled up, and the fire truck came to that scene, and that was what startled people to disperse. But if you could imagine being inside a department store, I mean, who amongst us hasn't been in a Macy's for something in our lifetime, and to see people just pouring in, grabbing whatever it is they wanted, and then only to be stopped by the fire department arrival. It was that kind of night, a night like we're seeing tonight.
Bob DeCastro joins us live from, Bob, where have you moved to now?
We moved to the Grove. You saw those pictures of the Nordstrom that was being looted, and just moved to a different location. We wanted to see what the Grove looked like. This is Sur La Table, the high-end kitchen store, and you can see all of the windows smashed here. Some of the protesters just left their signs right here on the ground. More smashed windows over here. It did look like someone might have gone inside here, plates there on the ground. We decided to come and walk in here and take a look to see how the Grove looked right now. I will tell you, it was just bizarre, because when we last spoke to you, we were at that intersection maybe 3 or 4 blocks away from here, and there were still people in the intersection, and they were destroying things, and then out of nowhere, people just started dissipating. They started going away, and even the cops, you know, they're just behind us right now, but they're starting to go away. But over here, we're gonna just take a closer look at what the Grove looks like here, and you can see more trash here on the ground. One of the things I can tell you is if you're gonna go through this area, and I can't even express to you how much destruction there is. I think people are going to be shocked when you're walking down the street and you see all of the destruction, the graffiti, so much graffiti all over the place. You can see some of the trash cans here knocked down in the middle of the Grove. This is the farmers market. Over here looks like they had adequately closed those doors as well. More trash cans that are down over here. And then here's the middle of the Grove here, where you still have some officers that are patrolling and making sure that things are safe here. More destruction and chairs that were thrown about over here. So we're going to walk through here a little bit more, and perhaps we can see some of the destructions there. The Grove did put up some of the barricades over here, so we're not going to be able to go through where that Nordstrom was over there. But by and large, what I can tell you is, by and large, all along this area, this Fairfax district, which was really the hotbed of all of the activity, all of the protests that happened here today, out of nowhere, people just started dissipating and going home. I had wondered where was this going to end once this curfew happened and people were just standing off screaming at officers, and officers were just standing there staring at them screaming, and they were throwing some projectiles at them and shooting these fireworks in the air and really just doing donuts in the middle of the intersections. Lots of the people just decided to go home. So at least for right now, it seems fairly quiet here, but there is extensive damage done through the Fairfax area and through the Grove area.
We're going to take a look now at a live picture. This is the Beverly Center.
Yeah.
And if you know the famous entrance right there to go up to the shops in the Beverly Center,
so they've moved.
That's what we're looking at.
They've moved from one shopping iconic spot to another iconic shopping spot. Maybe that's why they left where Bob was, is they moved to the Beverly Center.
Yeah, what's different about this one is this is an indoor mall,
right,
where the Grove is an outdoor mall where you can actually easily access, say, a Nordstrom. This is the outside of the Beverly Center on Beverly. I don't see anybody inside from this perspective here. There is a Macy's to one side of it. There's that garage that you enter there, and you can drive up to the different levels of the garage. There is a restaurant down in this lower level here.
But you wonder how much of this was already closed because of COVID-19 and how much of it is locked up and how
well, they were just open.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah. They were just open.
I mean, you think about how extraordinary it is what we just watched with Bob DeCastro, right? You think of the Grove, which, as I've said tonight, gets more traffic than Disneyland. Millions and millions and millions of people. And what it would be like at the Grove on a normal Saturday night, and all the people that go to the movie theaters and go out to dinner there, and how bustling that street is. And to see that street of the Grove completely empty and dark and windows shattered, and Bob DeCastro sort of walking through it by himself, it was a pretty extraordinary sight to see in this surreal night that does feel like we are living in some sort of movie or something. And if you were to think about the chaos, I mean, this makes me think of the politics guy in me. Like Vladimir Putin has spent so much money and time trying to create chaos and dissent in America, and to get people to fight with them amongst themselves and to dehumanize themselves and to create almost anarchy in the country. And that is what is playing out in the streets of the entire country, not only here in California, but around the country. There's just so much anger, so much distrust, so much pent-up rage that is being expressed tonight all over the country. It is an extraordinary moment in American history that we are all witnessing after this other extraordinary moment in American history of all these people that have been stuck at home and angry about that for months, and to see all of this happen tonight. It is hard to really process what we are witnessing. This is one of those nights where you will remember years from now where you were. And this is one of those nights that will change the future of our city.
Alex, you're absolutely right on that. It's one of those nights where we will mark the anniversary of this in years to come. We will talk about the change that comes from this. We'll talk about things like this, the damage and the destruction, and how long it takes some people to rebuild from this.
Yeah, this is the Melrose, Fairfax area, another fire. And Christine, if you think about, and it's tough to remember what a regular news day looks like, because we haven't had one pretty much this entire year, but on a regular news day, like that fire would be our lead story. And the whole thing would just be about that one fire. We've seen like 60 experiences like that in all these different places. It is so hard to keep up because there is so much happening right now at the same time. And in the days to come, as Bob said, as we all sort of will start to recognize all the damage in all the different places and to try to pick up the pieces, is going to be so difficult at a time when we're already being told to social distance and disinfect everything and not go out, and workers are being kept away and restaurants are being kept at 25% capacity. Well, it's hard to even think about what the future is going to look like.
Alex, you talk about a normal news day, and perhaps because we've been doing this for several hours now, maybe you've forgotten that I've been anchoring from home. You know, because with the social distancing, Fox has one anchor team one anchor at home and one anchor here in the studio. So I was brought in to cover this with you here at the studio. And if people could see the visual, we are sitting at different desks. So there is a reminder that there is no normalcy right now with the coronavirus alone. And then you see what's happening across our country right now with protests like this in so many different cities, from Houston to Vegas to New York to Atlanta. And then just even the communities here, I'm seeing protests in Santa Ana and Fontana, and there was one in Rancho Cucamonga. So right now we're looking here at the Melrose and Fairfax area that's been hit a little bit hard today. And what makes me sad about this is so many of these shops are affordable shops. They're shops that cater to the trendy and the hip, which maybe perhaps makes them attractive to a young person wanting to go in and loot. But what I love about them is they're shops that cater to people of all races and all economics, that really draw an eclectic, interesting, fun crowd. And to see people target these shops and these business owners who have been out of work because of the coronavirus, making no money.
Right, and traditionally, of course, also an area with so many different Jewish businesses in this area as well. So, all right, well, we are approaching the top of the hour. As we approach 9 o'clock, we want to do a bit of a restart and welcome you to our Fox 11 special coverage of unrest in Los Angeles.
Police and protesters battling on the skirmish lines, patrol cars in flames, the mayor of LA calling for calm.
To let the world know who we are and the world that we want to create.
Now, Fox 11's special coverage of the unrest in Los Angeles.
Good evening. It's now 9 o'clock, and welcome to Fox 11's special coverage of that unrest. I'm Alex Michelson.
And I'm Christine Devine. It is so very strange to be here in the studio. I've been anchoring from home during the coronavirus pandemic to allow for that social distancing. This is a very important night in our city, in our country, in our history, as we look at the aftermath of the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis and the reaction to that police incident, that police arrest on Friday, that officer arrested, and now you have these protests that have spilled out into the streets of Los Angeles. We've been watching them all day in this area of the Fairfax district, and you're looking now at a business that's been set on fire at Melrose and Fairfax, and the fire department feeling safe enough to come into the area to be able to put this fire out.
Kevin Takumi is in Skyfox right now looking at this from the air. It looks like firefighters are trying to get a handle of this. How are they doing, Kevin?
Yep. Yeah, this is that fire that we were looking about 10 minutes ago, and they had one engine that was on scene here and trying to get a handle on it. But because of the looting, there's so much debris in there. They're not making, they're not able to make access into the building itself because of all the debris that's been knocked down inside and inside of it. So that you can see that. It's really starting to take off. It's gotten into the attic here. It was just a small one portion of it, but now it looks like it's getting up into the attic space there, and they're still trying to fight this from the outside. They're not able to make entrance once again because there's so much debris inside. It's just too dangerous for them to get in there. So they're going to fight this fire here from the outside. That's all they can do right now, and they've had so many fires that they've been responding to throughout the evening here, and a lot of stores that have been looted all the way down Melrose.
So much angst in so many different areas. Kevin, you're going to stay on top of that literally as we watch that picture unfold. We want to bring into the conversation Supervisor Janice Hahn, who, of course, her family are such a history of leadership in this city. Her father, the chair of the LA County Board of Supervisors, her brother, the mayor of Los Angeles, now Janice Hahn, who has been a member of the city council and Congress and now an LA County supervisor. You have so much love for this city, and I'm sure you've got to have so much pain tonight.
I do. I'm just watching TV and just my heart breaks. And I was on the phone with my brother earlier, and we were both remembering. I was only 13 when the Watts riots happened, and our dad drove to Imperial and Avalon about 2 in the morning to see what was going on, and his car was hit with bricks that night. Then we both remember, of course, in 92, the flashpoint at Normandy and Florence, which was right where we grew up. And now to see this again, it's just heartbreaking. There's still so much justified anger and resentment in people that we just can't seem to get the kind of justice that people have longed for all these years. There's no tolerance for unarmed black men getting killed by law enforcement, but this is now not a protest. This is now just a full-fledged destruction. And I'm worried for not just the city of LA, I'm worried for the whole county of Los Angeles. I am now hearing about planned protests all over the county tomorrow.
Janice, Supervisor Hahn, we should note your brother, Jim Hahn, the former mayor of Los Angeles, and your father, also a supervisor. Your father was such a great healer. Would he have been surprised by something like this yet again? Because I looked at the posting that you sent out, having been through these 65 riots, the 92 riots, and now this again. Would your father have been surprised?
I think he would have been, because, after the Watts riots in 65, we had a whole commission, the McCone Commission, that looked at the underlying causes for that riot, and we found there were so many inequities and injustice in South Los Angeles, and he fought to build the hospital in Watts and worked so hard to, bring equal treatment and justice to those that he represented in South LA. And then, of course, LAPD was under consent decree for a while, hoping that we again would learn lessons and we would begin to treat people equally. So he would have been, I think, surprised and saddened. He greeted Dr. King when he first came to the airport in the early 60s. So he was a civil rights champion, and I served in Congress with John Lewis, who really knew what it was like to be beaten by law enforcement for the right to vote in Alabama. So we just feels like we haven't gotten all the justices that we need this many years later. But yeah, he would have found something to say. People are texting me tonight saying, what would your dad have said? And I know he would have called for calm. He would have called for peace. But then I think he would have worked every day of his life to try to right the wrongs that people are still feeling in our society.
So you're one of the most important leaders in this county, one of 5 members of the Board of Supervisors. One of the issues that's been raised by some of these protesters is the idea that the district attorney should not be in charge of policing the police when the district attorney has to work so closely with police. Do you think there needs to be some sort of independent agency that's in charge of looking over the police department when it comes to criminal charges?
Well, I know people have raised that issue, and I know even in Minneapolis they were concerned about the DA not bringing charges as quickly as they could, and that's certainly something we could look at. Although, I have known Jackie Lacey. She's a friend of mine. I'm supporting her, and I know that she has great integrity and honesty. But, I'm kind of the kind of person that I always think it's a good idea to look at things. I always think it's a good idea that we get complete transparency and honesty in all of our dealings, with the public, with law enforcement, and certainly with government.
How do you think we can avoid a situation like this in the future? What sort of systemic change, if any, do you think is needed?
That's such a good question. I don't think we will have the peace we need in this country until we know that everyone can feel safe, that African-American parents don't have to keep having that talk with their young boys about what it might be like if they get pulled over by law enforcement. I mean, it's just so disturbing to still see these images. And I'm thankful that we have people who are videotaping things so that we can have transparency. But it just breaks your heart that this is still happening in this country, and doesn't seem like we have justice for all yet. And until that day comes when everyone is treated equally under the law, then I think people's anger and resentment will continue to grow. But I will say that, but this protest that we're seeing tonight on the TV really is not about, George Floyd. This has moved beyond that, and that is also upsetting to me because I don't want to take the issue off of what happened in Minneapolis. And I don't want to take that issue away by looking at this destruction that's happening tonight.
And your father, I remember moving here to Los Angeles and thinking of how beloved your father was in the African-American community and for his work there. Supervisor, we're looking right now at a Target on Pico and La Brea that we believe is being looted right now. But I wanted to ask you the question about the National Guard troops. We know we are in a curfew now from 8 p.m. to 5:30 in the morning. The L.A. mayor said to be requesting as many as 700 National Guard troops, the sheriff perhaps requesting 1,000. Your thoughts on the National Guard coming to the streets of Los Angeles tonight?
Well, again, it brings me back to, to the Watts riots. I remember very well, and there was some criticism at that point that we didn't ask for them soon enough in Watts. And I hope that they don't escalate any kind of tension out there, but I am happy that they're coming. I believe there's going to be 500 for LASD, the sheriffs, another 500 for the LAPD to help us. I welcome their presence to bring calm. Again, I've been having people send me tonight on social media planned protests all over the county tomorrow. So it is not just in downtown LA. It's not just in Beverly Hills. It looks like they're going to spring up everywhere, and we're going to need help to calm the public and keep this destruction from happening. So I welcome them.
All right, Supervisor Janice Hahn, thank you for sharing your views, and we hope you stay safe as well as your family tonight.
Thank you.
We go from her to another of the prominent leaders of Southern California, the mayor of Los Angeles, Eric Garcetti, joining us now on the phone. Mr. Mayor, I wish we could talk under better circumstances. Let's start sort of with the basic. Your message for the people of Los Angeles tonight.
Well, thank you, Alex and Christine. Thank you for showing what our community is about, even in the toughest moments. Look, my message is very clear. If you're in pain, I feel that pain. If you're angry, I get it. But this has moved from being a protest to vandalism, to destruction. And nobody should be out there making a mistake that's not just about May 30th, but something that you will live with and that we as a community will live with long beyond. Something which has moved this fundamentally away from racial justice and reforms and making sure that in Minneapolis and around this country that there's justice, to, if we remember the lessons, and I know that some young people who are out there on the streets today maybe weren't even alive in 1992. It took 23 years to recover to the employment levels we once had. That hit our hardest communities hardest. And in the midst of this pandemic, on a weekend where people could have gone back to work and jobs could have started to come back to those who are most in need, let's think about them as we think about restoring order. And so we need everybody to be home. There's a curfew in effect. It's not unique to Los Angeles. There's multiple cities in our county and dozens of cities around the United States. Violence is never the answer to violence, and we will be very strong tonight that if you are still out, we assume it is to make trouble, and we will have to make sure as we're seeing looting, fires, you can hurt yourself, you could hurt a government official who is there to protect and to serve, or to, in the fire department, make sure that there's not destruction of people's lives and property. So don't make a mistake that you will live with for a long time. Let's go home, let's restore the peace, and let's get back to what this was about. Racial justice, not the destruction of our city.
Mayor, as we are watching the LAPD officers move into that target location at Pico and La Brea that has been looted there, I do want to get to the question I also posed to Supervisor Hahn, and that is about the National Guard troops, that you are requesting the National Guard to come in to help keep the order. Tell us more about that, please.
Sure. I spoke earlier today, at the beginning of the day, with Governor Newsom, spoke with him later in the day and requested those National Guard guardsmen and women to come in. These are everyday citizens who live here and care about our communities, and they will be here in just a few hours. We expect at least 1,000 between the sheriffs and the LAPD. We'll share those, of course, in the region and deploy them. We might have as many as 1,200 total. But that will help us be able to just hold places and to make sure that, people who are dead set on trying to, promote mischief, get out there and steal things, who are about the destruction of our city and not the uniting of it, that there will have some backup for our law enforcement officers. And for our peace officers who are out there tonight, I want to say a special message to them. And I know this protest for many is fundamentally about those bad officers and a culture in so many places, too many places, that have hit our black and brown communities. But I want you to guys know, and the women, that you're heroes. I know how scary it can be out there in your own city. These are officers who have given their lives. These are officers who have helped people with domestic violence situations get out of them, who have mentored young people, who have saved the city in the toughest moments, and we cannot dehumanize them, just as we ask to make sure no department in this country dehumanizes any of us too. It's only when we see each other as human beings we will get there. But tonight I want you to know we have your back, and we have this city's back. We will continue to do what it takes to restore order, even if it takes some hours or some days. Los Angeles will stand strong again, but we need everyone to help do that together.
Mayor, what do you say to critics who say you haven't been tough enough here? At 3:30, you said that you were dismissive of the idea of the National Guard, that they didn't need to come in. Maybe they could have come in earlier and stopped some of this earlier. Last night, hundreds of people were arrested in downtown Los Angeles who were causing problems, and then they were all released today. Many of them are back doing this again today. What do you say to critics who say you should have been tougher, and if you were, some of this could have been stopped?
100%. I said at the beginning of the day, you tell me, Chief, what this department needs, and I have your back. Talk to the governor at the beginning of the day to be able to prepare if necessary. At that point, the intel that I got back from our leadership at LAPD was, at this point, that we don't need that. And to be clear, 500 and 700 National Guard men and women will be amazing, and we're glad they're here. We have 10,000 LAPD officers, so for anybody who would think that that doubles or triples our people on the ground, that is not where the main effort is. It is the men and women who are deployed from the 10,000 strong Los Angeles Police Department and our sister agencies around here that are doing that work, and it ignores their hard work. We're happy to have, and we've requested that be supplemented. These will not be these will not be National Guardsmen and women who will be doing enforcement and police work. They will hold territory. Their training is different. We want our police officers who know how to take on these difficult situations to do that, but it's going to be a 5 or 7% supplement to that, and we welcome it.
Mayor, I've got to think the visual for Angelenos is going to be something they've never seen, to have the National Guard on our streets, for especially a younger generation perhaps who hasn't lived through some of the things that perhaps some of the more mature in our community have lived through. Can you paint a picture of what that might look like to have the National Guard here?
Absolutely. Look, if we all can collectively bring calm and restore order, these are folks that will be there who are everyday citizens who serve in uniform, and you'll see them, in key places, helping to protect our city and to keep the calm, to say that there are lines that are criminal, and if we cannot see that, we are blind. When people rob a store, that is a crime. When people light a fire that could kill people, that is a crime. When you set a police car on fire with bullets in it that can explode and kill your fellow protesters and law enforcement officials, that is a crime. And so we need to say that civil society does demand justice, but it also needs peace. And so if we cannot restore the peace, justice cannot come, and vice versa. So if we see these folks on our streets, I hope folks will thank them, embrace them, listen to this curfew, make sure you're at home, stay safe, and do all of our collective work. I think people who don't want to see racial justice in this country are probably celebrating these images. It's changed the conversation fundamentally from one of the horrific images we saw in the demand to justice to suddenly people burning their own cities down. They must be celebrating. Let's not give them that. Let us do what is in our better angels. Let us make sure that we are out there bringing the peace. And for those who are clearly not about peace, but who are about wanton destruction and who want to divide us, and we don't even know what their motivations are, whether it's criminal or whether it's just to show the world we are divided, let us not stand for that.
Mayor, I can only imagine what this year has been like for you and how exhausting the coronavirus has been, working on that nearly 24/7 and now this. I mean, is there part of you that just sort of feels powerless tonight? I mean, you were vowing so clearly, telling people what to do tonight, and clearly there are a lot of people in the streets that are just not listening, which is not unique to you. I mean, the same thing is happening all over the country. How do you lead in this moment when people simply do not want to follow?
Look, before I'm a mayor, I'm an Angelino. I'm a fourth-generation product of this city, and I love Los Angeles. And it breaks my heart to see the city, the images that we see today, because it does not define us. But when you live in a place with 10 million people, of course a few thousand can define to the nation and even to ourselves what this city looks like. I know this is not who we are in L.A. And secondly, my responsibility is to protect life and liberty. People have to be very clear, and especially I appreciate what you said, Christine, so much about people who haven't lived through this, especially our younger generation. The most people who died in the riots were people who were upset with what happened with Rodney King. In black and brown communities, it was a tragedy because at the end of that, when all the smoke cleared, it wasn't that black and brown businesses were stronger. They didn't recover for decades. It wasn't that the loss of lives were somehow the people who brought injustice. It was innocent victims and neighbors of people. We cannot let that repeat. And I believe that we still have time, not just in Los Angeles, because you're right, this didn't even start in Los Angeles. This is a national moment, and LA is not unique. We have 25-plus cities under curfews. We see burning across America. That if we don't, for the new generation, say, it is our responsibility, yes, to feel that pain, to have that hurt, but to also channel that into not the violence that we see, because violence never is the answer to violence.
Mayor, let me ask you this question, because this is coming up in the black community with the Black Lives Matter protest, who wanted to be out there to speak their truth on this issue, to speak of their concerns, and they feel sometimes that in a situation like this with the looting, that it is not necessarily Black Lives Matter protesters. How concerned are you that there is another element? We hear of the anarchist. How concerned are you that there's another element at play here?
I think there's probably 3 or 4 different elements at play. And I think you're right. Last night, I know a council member, Marquise Aristoson, reached out to some of the BLM leadership. They said, we're not downtown. That there are folks that will use this. We've seen this in social media. We've seen this in recent campaigns. We've seen domestic terrorist groups, foreign actors, as well as probably just young people who are seeing this, and looky-loos who come by who think this might be interesting, and those who are criminals who would exploit this moment to go rob stores and small businesses that are already crippled and hoping to stand up. This weekend could have been one of that. So I think there's a mix of different people with different motivations, but all of them that will break the law and who will decide to make the decision that I would rather destroy progress and hope rather than unify it and bring it forward, they will be met with our collective civil society and the hardworking men and women who are in law enforcement, who we depend on the most difficult of nights like this to restore order in our city. And anybody who would be against that, who would say that, caricature all cops as something, they haven't spent enough time with police officers to hear their story. And they're just as justified to say, well, I want to make sure law enforcement hears my story as a youth of color, but it's not a one-way street. And to destroy and to put people's lives at risk. And remember, most of the victims when these riots go on, we saw this in Louisville, 7 people shot. None of them were law enforcement. People have to realize that they are responsible. And I said, this is a mistake that you will make that is not just about tonight. It will live with you for a long time to come, so don't do it.
We've been listening to you almost every night talking about the coronavirus. there's been extraordinary amount of angst and anger of people who have felt like they've been trapped in their homes for the last couple months. The rules have just been loosening up. This was supposed to be a celebratory weekend to go out to a restaurant for the first time. How do you think the coronavirus and the stir-crazy nature of it, especially among young people who may be unemployed and anxious and hormonal and everything else right now, how do you think that is exacerbating this situation?
There's no question. This virus is now claiming even more victims, more destruction, more suffering. But that is no question in my mind a part of this. But vice versa, this violence is slowing down our fight against coronavirus. It is allowing probably it to spread. Today we had to shut down at 3 o'clock our testing centers, and probably thousands of people who had tests today couldn't get them because of the fear of public safety. That's on the hands of folks who right now under a curfew are deciding that they would rather loot a shop, start a fire, and cause violence. And if they say that they're about justice, then they need to go home. And those who don't say they're about justice need to be met with the consequences of the law.
So, Mayor, we are watching a building on fire right now. I don't know if you have our visual up to see what's going on. It's quite an intense fire. It's probably the most intense fire I've seen us cover all night. You speak so much about police officers and
now you should be able to hear me perfectly. I'm set up a Zoom meeting, which is free and open to everybody and anybody who's there who wants to talk about what's going on. Is this, as the president has been tweeting, left-wing radicals, some kind of organized anarcho-syndicalist union of people, or is it just a lot of unemployed people who are really pissed off? Is it black people, Latinos? What is it? Where do you live? What are you seeing? Who do you think is doing this? And what do you think the reasoning is? Is this part of the ongoing compression that we've seen, the lack of work, or is it just literally a lynching and a response to that lynching? I want to hear where you live, what you think. We're going to open up a Zoom in 5 minutes. Bottom of the hour. So that would be 9:30 Pacific and 12:30 Eastern AM, that is. And what would that be? 10:30, 11:30 Central. So wherever you're standing, doesn't matter. Spread it out. Let's get a big old Zoom going. Let's talk about this. What you know, what you think is going on. I am not even a mile from where these buildings are on fire right now. I'm next door to Beverly Hills. I'm next door to the Grove. The cops are out. The sirens are blasting. So I've been able to get a bird's eye view, such as you're seeing on the screen now. I'm going to discontinue this so we can go live on Zoom in 5 minutes. So I invite you to join me. Again, I've posted the Zoom invitation on your chat screen. So it doesn't matter where you are, Facebook, whether you're on YouTube, Twitter Periscope, Twitch, the whole soup, cat, and pizzas. Doesn't matter. You're invited into this Zoom, and we will stream it back to all of those platforms as well. So that's bottom of the hour. Looking forward to seeing all of you then.